Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cooking from Quarantine. Now, I don't really fancy myself a baker. I'm a cook. I feel that the two are pretty different from each other. There's overlapping skill sets, but I do feel that baking is a science and cooking is an art. And I don't love the precision that goes into baking. It's very hard for me to improvise because I don't really know all the rules around it the way that I do with cooking. However, I do think that every competent home cook should have a go-to recipe for dessert that they can really nail every time. And look, a lot of the times when I'm hosting a dinner party, I'll just do like fruit and chocolate because honestly, after a big dinner party, particularly the way I cook, where foods are rich and plentiful, some fruit and chocolate really does hit the spot. But nothing beats an amazing chocolate chip cookie, and these chocolate chip cookies that I make are the best. So let's get started. Now again, I'm really not a baker. I just got this KitchenAid mixer this year as a Hanukkah present for my hubby. I mean, a lot of it is just that I loved the color of it, but I thought that maybe I could make bread better if I had a standing mixer. I didn't think I was going to use it for baking, but as it turns out, making bread sucks, and bread is almost always better store-bought, but baking is pretty fun, and if there's a few things that you know how to do, it really is a good time. So we're going to need our mixer with a whisk attachment, or if you're doing it by hand, a whisk and like amazing upper body strength. Granulated sugar, which is the white regular sugar. I'm keeping mine in a Talenti container because Talenti containers are great, and it's my house, I do what I want. Brown sugar, packed, and if it's not soft, I learned this great little trick for softening brown sugar. Usually you put brown sugar away, and the next time you take it back out, it's like a brick. So if you pop it in the microwave in a bowl with a cup of water next to it, and just let it go for like 2 minutes and then keep checking it every 30 seconds, it softens the brown sugar enough, at least for you to use it for a little while. We need salt, one stick of melted butter. One stick is equal to half a cup, so it's 1 stick or half a cup of melted butter. 1 egg, got this little guy here. Vanilla extract. I don't use fancy vanilla extract. Again, I'm not that much of a baker. Some people use like really amazing Madagascar vanilla. I don't know, mine's McCormick. It's good. The cookies I make, they kick ass. All-purpose flour. Any brand will do ya. I don't know the difference between flours. There are a lot of differences between flours, but it's all-purpose unbleached flour. Baking soda, which is different from baking powder. Don't confuse them. Baking soda is this guy. I happen to keep this in my fridge at all times because it's a de-stinkifier. So I sort of always have it in the house, and that's more having to do with being a neat freak than being a baker of any kind. I never use baking soda in actual cooking, although there's reasons why one would use baking soda in cooking, deep frying things. And finally, chocolate. So if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that I put in a home order through Baldor this week because nobody's delivering at home during COVID-19. So I knew I had 8 pints of strawberries coming, and so I wanted some dark chocolate to be able to do some dipping because I'm very decadent. And this is what they sent me. So we have to get through our dark chocolate, and we're going to do that kind of 1 chocolate chip cookie at a time. So we need our whisk attachment, and then we can get started. The important thing when you're baking, and all you bakers out there already know this, but for the cooks among us, in baking, the order in which you put things in the bowl is very important. I didn't learn that until this year. So first we're going to do our wet ingredients, and that's our butter, our salt and our sugar. So, okay, not all of them are wet, and we're kind of separating out sugar from everything else, but you know, go with the flow, okay? This is, I know it's baking and it's a little precise and rigid, but you know, let's not be crazy. So we need a half a cup of granulated sugar. Okay, look, see, this whisk is kind of in the way. You see, it's a good thing baking churns out such deliciousness. And let me tell you, these chocolate chip cookies really fuck. I've tried a few different recipes for it, and chocolate chip cookies is one of those things that, like, the taste that you have for them is super specific. So some people like really cakey cookies. I don't. I like cake and I like cookies, and I like cake and cookies, but I don't like a cakey cookie. So it was a half a cup of granulated sugar. Now we need 3/4 cup of brown sugar, which I'm actually going to measure out using my quarter measuring scoop, because I want to be as precise as humanly possible. And I mean, I say that, but this is like kind of crappy and crumbly. But we're gonna make do, because it's coronavirus time and nothing matters anymore. So that's 1/4 cup. Let's call that 2/4 cup. I know I'm saying I'm supposed to be precise, but you know, we're doing the best that we possibly can. And here's 3/4 cup brown sugar. A teaspoon of salt. That's this guy. Again, always measure out your salt super carefully, because it's the one thing that, you know, I have lots of tricks for when I'm cooking, how to fix an over-salting problem. With baking, I haven't the foggiest idea. Salt and all of our butter. Let's get our little Le Creuset rubber scraper out, just to make sure all the butter goes in. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to turn this on and start whisking until a kind of paste forms that has no lumps, no bumps, no wrinkles. So let's put this, oh no! Huh. I wonder what this part is supposed to do, other than just say KitchenAid on it. I feel like it could run without it. I feel like if this were a car, I'm talking like I know anything about cars. I don't know. Let's run it without it and see what happens. Okay, so as we're whisking, let's talk about what the cookies are going to be like when they're done, which is the most exciting part. So as I said, there's lots of different textures and tastes when it comes to making cookies. I don't like a particularly cakey cookie. I like cookies that are super caramelized, chewy, almost to the point of toffee-like, with crispy edges. I like them to be dark golden brown. And so all of those things are why we would be melting our butter in order to make these cookies, as opposed to like putting it in cold, or you know, something that you would do with biscuits and the like. Okay, so this I think is looking pretty good. We have a couple of lumps of brown sugar in here, which I'm actually going to break up by hand. I told you my sugar was a little hard when I took it out. It always is, because I never use brown sugar. But I guess this is, you know what, I shouldn't say I guess this is okay, because that's how we come out with not so hot cookies. So okay, let's whisk this a little longer, make sure it's actually staying down. We'll whisk on a higher speed. Maybe that'll help. I don't know. We're learning together. I think that actually is helping. Okay, now we're ready to add in our vanilla and our egg. The vanilla, we need 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Vanilla extract is one of those things, like garlic, I think you measure with your heart, not with a measuring spoon. That was 1 tablespoon. Let's add like just a smidge more, just to make sure it really gets in everywhere. And then we need 1 egg. I don't know if the eggs that you use are supposed to be room temperature or not. Mine came out of the fridge like in the amount of time it took to set all of this up, 10 minutes, I don't know. So we're just going to crack an egg. The best way to crack an egg is not on the side of the bowl, because when the kind of egg shrapnel goes everywhere, it'll go into the bowl. The best way to crack an egg is right on your surface. You can always clean it up later. I do not know how to crack an egg one-handed. I have heard that Jacques Pepin also cannot crack an egg one-handed, and so I no longer have an insecurity complex or an inferiority complex about that, because he's one of the greatest chefs who ever lived, and he arguably knows more about eggs than anyone who ever lived, since he's the one who's like, if you can make an omelet, you can cook. So if he can't crack an egg with one hand, none of us should aspire to be that way either. So we're going to now whisk this until kind of ribbons are forming and falling off of the whisk. And when they're flowing in ribbons and they don't disappear right away, you know that you've whisked it enough. And again, I don't want to cut away during any of this, because I want you to see truly how long it takes the process to do all of this. Okay. Let's see. See, these ribbons are disappearing immediately, so I think we're gonna kind of crank these amps up to 11. And start whisking a little harder. While we do that, let's prep the rest of our ingredients, because we're going to be sifting the rest of our ingredients in. The rest of our ingredients are 1 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. That's some ribbony goodness. That's looking good. I'm actually going to keep it on a little bit longer, because I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing that. Once the flour goes in, you don't want to overmix, but while only these ingredients are in here, I don't think it's a big problem to aerate them a little bit more. I could be wrong about that. There's something about egg whites and air that I don't understand completely. So let's prep these ingredients. We want 1 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour and 1/2 teaspoon. Well, that was in my sink, so now we have to dry it off. This is what happens. We're cooking at home. This is not, a French patisserie, much to my dismay. Here we go, 1/2 teaspoon. Let's turn this off. And you can pop your whisk out of there now, because we're not going to be using it again. The rest of this is all going to be done by hand, not even by paddle mixer. That's how sensitive flour is to being overmixed, that we're not even going to continue the recipe. Come on, little dude. How do you come out? Here we go. Okay. And that somehow got KitchenAid grease all over my fingers, so somehow I'm washing my hands more to make cookies than I do to make brisket, which I don't know if that says more about me or the recipe. Okay, so we're going to be sifting the rest of the ingredients in. So put a little, it's not a colander, it's a sieve, over your bowl, and we're going to measure, again, as precisely as we can. We got 1 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. And usually when a recipe calls for something being sifted, you measure pre-sift, not post-sift. I learned that from watching Ina Garten, because she teaches us all the way to live. Okay, that's 1 1/4 cup of flour. We need our 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. 1/2 teaspoon, don't get this one wrong. This is another thing that can threaten your cookies pretty badly. Put it right in with the flour, and then we're going to sift in. And that just means that we're kind of shaking it over the bowl so that it kind of looks like it's snowing underneath. And wow, actually, we have like no big crumbles in here or anything. That's pretty fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to take our bowl off and we're going to do the rest of this by hand. The reason that you're doing the rest of this by hand is because you don't want the gluten to develop too much in the cookies. In fact, we're going to kind of stop mixing as soon as this comes together and looks like a dough, which you can see already we're only a couple of folds in, and you do want to fold more than anything else. We're only a couple of folds in and it's already, I mean, that's basically dough now. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to resist the urge to continue stirring, because if we keep stirring, all it's going to do is get the gluten all hot and bothered, and that's going to make for a really fluffy, in a bad way, cookie. It'll be like a sponge cake kind of cookie. Not sponge cake. Sponge cake is delightful. This would be like a dense fluff. Okay, 1 cup of dark chocolate chips, or you could do half a cup of dark chocolate chips and half a cup of whatever your other favorite little addition to cookies are. Sometimes I do this with chopped walnuts. I really like walnuts and dark chocolate together. Okay, and again, we're doing like the least amount of folding possible to get all of this situated without having to overwork the dough, and I think that's pretty good. The next step with this is saran wrap, or as we call it in my house, Susan saran wrap. We're going to pour the dough out onto our saran wrap, and truth be told, I'm like sort of not allowed to handle the saran wrap alone because I get kind of knotted up in it like a child, but I'm going to do my best. That's all we can do. We can only do our best. These are Corona times, and everybody's just fighting the good fight, right? So we're going to flip this dough out onto our saran wrap, because we're going to let it chill in the fridge for, at a minimum, 30 minutes. At an absolute minimum, 30 minutes. I find that 30 minutes is nowhere near enough. I would say at a minimum, you should let it sit for 2 hours. Ideally, I'd let it go overnight. When you let it go overnight, it allows all of those like good toffee flavors to develop, and it makes for a much more rich and interesting cookie flavor. Come on, let's not waste any of this. Now, there's an old wives' tale, and some people think of it as conventional wisdom. It is not. That eating raw cookie dough is bad for you and can give you salmonella. And the reason for that is that, here, watch this. Fuck the police, right? Oh, hell yeah. The reason for that is because people think that the eggs will give you salmonella. It's not true. It used to be the case back in the day, but we have pasteurized eggs now. And so those eggs are not going to give you salmonella. You could straight up eat them raw. I don't advise that, and I'm not a doctor. So talk to your doctor about if eating raw eggs is right for you. See, I don't know. Here we go. But the eggs will not give you salmonella because they're pasteurized. What could give you salmonella, and what is dangerous about eating raw cookie dough, is the flour. The flour, since it's not pasteurized and not processed and not treated, that can make you sick if you eat it raw. And so if you would like to have cookie dough that you can eat in the safety of your own home, and, you know, let's face it, we're all going to be in our own homes with cookie dough for a while. If you just pop the flour that you're going to be using in the microwave for a minute or two before putting it into your mix, you've now zapped any of the danger out of your flour, and you'll be able to just chow down on raw cookie dough once it's done. So, like, you're welcome very much for bringing that information into your life. So we're going to take our dough. I'm going to put it in my fridge overnight. So I'll meet back up with you tomorrow when we're turning this into real cookies. This recipe, by the way, it will yield like roughly 12 cookies. It depends on how extra you get with your cookie size measurements. I've actually found that I could get about 15 out of this because it's a pretty big recipe, and I like small cookies because I feel like they get a little bit crispy crunchy. So I'll see you tomorrow when we make the rest of our cookies. And we're back with our amazing chocolate chip cookies. So the dough for these cookies has sat in the refrigerator overnight, letting all the flavors get together, that melted butter really developing a rich and deep caramel flavor. So we've cut up our dough and turned it into little balls and then flattened the balls on our sheet pan. I'm using a Silpat underneath the cookies. Parchment paper works just as well, but you do need something between the cookies and the sheet pan or they will scorch. So like I said, usually I get closer to 15 cookies out of this recipe. This is 15 cookies. I don't know, like maybe some of the dough got eaten throughout the middle of the night. But we are going to put these into a 350-degree preheated oven for 12 minutes if you like them gooey on the inside and crispy on the outside. If you'd like them more done, it's 14 minutes. And if you'd like them not crispy at all and really kind of mushy and soft, it's 10 minutes. And so we'll be right back after our cookies bake. So our cookies have cooled for 2 minutes. And I want to show you what the perfect insides of them look like. They are crispy on the outside. They smell unbelievably good. Here's what it looks like when we break them open. Fantastic. They're crispy on the edges. They're gooey on the inside. They're the absolute perfect chocolate chip cookie.